Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. I'm Jenna Ellis. Join me on Jenna Ellis Tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern for a lot of Legal Eagle panel topics. We have so much to discuss, from Hunter Biden's conviction, should he get jail time, and what should Donald Trump do in response. We discuss the issues of potential pardons, either from Joe Biden himself, even though he hasn't promised to. Let's face reality that he could November 6th, regardless of what way the election swings. So how should the Trump camp respond? We also discuss a federal judge that undermined the Florida legislature and Governor Ron DeSantis remarkably in a very strong and ridiculous opinion. And we also discuss the ongoing judicial reform issues and the attacks from the left on our U.S. Supreme Court. All this and more at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Salem News Channel. See you there. Hi friends, Jenna Ellis, host of Jenna Ellis Tonight, and we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an utter disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a constant issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, and those have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. So there are so many reasons that Americans should consider wise investing and investments in gold and silver, and Legacy Precious Metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com, download the free investor guide, and I have read it. There is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is the time to not roll the dice on your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that is in gold and that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals and make sure to tell them that I sent you. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. So Hunter Biden has been convicted and the fallout still continues. This take from Speaker Mike Johnson I thought was particularly apt. He posted on social media yesterday, a year ago, Hunter Biden was offered a sweetheart deal that would have allowed him to bypass the justice system on these charges. Because whistleblowers spoke out and House Republicans sounded the alarm, Hunter was brought to court. Today, he was found guilty of all charges. Now it's time for DOJ to investigate the millions of dollars in payouts from foreign countries looking to curry favor with his father. We will continue to demand accountability for the corrupt business dealings of the Biden family. So let's introduce our legal eagles. We have Mike Donnelly, who is a law professor and an attorney, and Gerard Filitti, who is the Lawfare Project Senior Counsel. So, gentlemen, welcome. And obviously, there is political fallout to this that I want to get to in a moment. But, Mike, let's first start with the conviction itself. I don't think that anyone was necessarily surprised here, but Speaker Johnson makes an excellent point that initially the special counsel David Weiss for the DOJ wanted to give Hunter Biden this sweetheart deal. So all of the leftists and the Democrats who are suggesting that this proves that no one is above the law and so forth really doesn't paint the entire picture and tell the full story.
Well, that's right, Jenna. The plea deal, Andrew Weiss, I think, who's the counsel here, tried to sneak in a plea deal that would have exempted Biden from being charged or prosecuted for virtually anything that he had done. And there were a number of people who blew the whistle. including the Heritage Foundation. I want to point people to the Heritage Foundation's Daily Signal. They've got a fantastic article from yesterday that kind of details this particular issue. They got involved, others got involved to file a brief pointing out how this was outrageous. And the Judge Noriega in the case, started asking some questions, and the prosecutors realized they weren't going to be able to get away with sweeping this under the rug. And now we have a guilty conviction, no one's surprised. But again, we talked about this last week with Ron. These are not the crimes that should be prosecuted. What should be prosecuted is what Speaker Johnson talked about, which is the corruption, the defrauding of the United States, the international pay-to-play influence peddling scandal, scheme, whatever you want to call it, that has been going on not just for the last 4 years, but since Vice President Biden was in the White House during the Obama administration. What else was going on? Inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah, should the American people know? Well, Gerard, I think this does speak to how much America has kind of turned into court TV with the 2024 election. And we have this ridiculous conviction out of New York. And now we have this conviction for Hunter Biden on, charges that, you can't lie on federal forms, but ultimately in the grand scheme of things, I think that Speaker Johnson is right that there are a lot more serious things that the entire Biden family, including the current sitting president, should be investigated for and potentially brought under charges for. And so what happens next? I mean, should Hunter Biden face jail time like some on the conservative right are suggesting for these types of charges that now resulted in 3 felony convictions?
Well, it's an interesting dilemma that we're in because Hunter Biden has been convicted of a gun charge, but related to crack cocaine. And when you think about who's in American prisons right now for gun charges involving crack cocaine, we're talking about a lot of minorities. So we're seeing here the potential for the ultimate in white privilege to see the white, well-educated son of the president of the United States skate by without jail time when many people who are facing similar charges end up behind bars. Should he face jail time? Probably. Will he? Probably not. Probation is not uncommon, but given everything else that he is accused of, we really need to look past the gun charges and look at what's up ahead, which is the tax trial, and also at what has not been charged, which are FARA violation of the Foreign Agent Registration Act, because that really gets into, or that would get into the perfidy, that gets into the issues of what the Biden family actually has been involved with, dealings with foreign countries, and how foreign influence has affected both the Obama administration when Biden was vice president and Obama's current administration. So that's really what's interesting, but we may not see that at all while Biden is president, although we may get good glimpses of what evidence might come up during the tax trial.
Yeah, and Mike, there has been a lot of speculation whether President Biden will pardon his son. He has said to the American public that he won't, and yet we know that politicians often change their campaign promises. And regardless of the outcome of 2024, on November 6th, Joe Biden could pardon Hunter Biden for all of these federal charges and also commute his sentence if he wants to, regardless of which way the election swings. So should Donald Trump go a step further and with all of this lawfare, maybe look at this particular conviction and actually pledge to pardon Hunter Biden himself?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure that Donald Trump should commit to pardoning anyone, although he has said he would pardon a variety of people if people elect him. I would be surprised if Joe Biden did not pardon and or commute his son's crimes. Whether he wins or loses, it would strike me as unlikely that he will not do so. So I think he will. I'm not sure what Trump gains from saying that he would pardon Hunter Biden. In fact, I'm not sure I'd be happy about that. Hunter Biden and Joe Biden have been involved in conspiracies and schemes to defraud the United States for many, many years, and they're not the only ones. They're just the face of that conspiracy. And there are others in the administration, 3-letter federal agencies who are politicizing and weaponizing the justice system. And there needs to be a very deep investigation into all of that. So no, I don't think there should be any pardoning, but I expect that Joe Biden will pardon his son.
I expect that he will too. And like I said, I mean, regardless of the outcome of the election, November 6th is coming, and it would be very easy for Joe Biden to say, well, circumstances have changed, or however they want to spin the PR. But Gerard, what do you think about, a pardon just for this particular verdict? I mean, obviously, I think what you articulated previously and what Mike just spoke to with other investigations that are ongoing into Hunter Biden that include the whole Biden crime family, those are more significant, more serious. But is there political gain potentially for Trump to try to diffuse the situation and mitigate it overall to say, listen, the system doesn't need to be weaponized against me or against even the son of my political opponent. And just for this particular verdict, commit to a pardon in hope maybe of a return from Joe Biden and ask, if he would commit to pardoning Trump.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting way to look at it, but I agree with Mike. I don't think that it's in Trump's interest to offer or to consider any pardons for Hunter Biden, especially on the gun charges, because what we're talking about here is a sad issue of addiction and the way it affected his behavior. And we've seen videos of that, videos from a laptop, which turn out to be the accurate and truthful laptop of Hunter Biden, despite a years-long campaign to deny that it was his or that the information was planted. But what we've seen is behavior that is outrageous, that offends a lot of Americans. And pardoning Hunter for that would be difficult. It would be costly because that is a moral issue as well. We want to forgive and to help people who have addiction issues, but not when they're buying firearms, not when they're waving them around while doing drugs. So I don't think Trump gains anything. I think quite a few Americans would be upset if he did that. Flip side is Joe Biden should be considering a pardon if Trump is convicted on any federal charges, because these charges are not things that should have been brought in the first place. And Joe Biden would be doing the ultimate political gracious act of recognizing that by pardoning any convictions for federal charges and making sure that he sets the message that these kinds of prosecutions should not be tolerated in America. Will he do that? Probably not.
Probably not. And it's unfortunate, Mike Donnelly, that we are in the situation that we are in heading into November of 2024, where everyone is talking about the injustice of the system, but they're talking about it from a distinctly partisan, tribal, siloed perspective. And so, what should be the message for genuine conservative originalists and people who care about the integrity of our institutions moving forward, rather than just saying, well, Hunter Biden should go to jail because he's a Biden, or Donald Trump should go to jail because he's Donald Trump. And it seems like that's just the rhetoric in the court of public opinion. But how should conservatives really look at this, beyond even 2024?
Jenna, it comes back to, do we want a country that is based on the rule of law and founding American principles or not? That's what we need. And our federal government has moved away from that. It has become unmoored from those principles. And what is the solution? I think the solution is in the states to take up the mantle of leadership. I don't think the federal government is capable of reforming itself. There are some really good people there, but as a system, I don't think it's possible. What does that look like? I really don't know, but I think we need to have a conversation about that.
That sounds awfully a lot like what Justice Alito said, and I say that very respectfully, because I think we're all in the same ideological camp as Alito, and his comments on saying America needs to return to godliness were actually very apt. But we'll talk about that in another segment. But quickly, in the last about 30 seconds, Gerard, to you, where do we go from here?
Well, that's a good question. Where we go from here, we need to have a good, long thought about how we want to see ourselves as a nation. And if we do see ourselves as a nation that respects the Constitution, that respects our democratic values, the ones that many Americans have fought and died for over the years, we need to put aside this partisanship in the legal system, in the justice system, because this is the most dangerous thing for American democracy, is when we weaponize the judicial system to go after political opponents or to bring charges that would not be brought against other people if they were not involved in politics. So that requires a good hard look, because it can be weaponized against anyone, not just people we don't like. And that's the real danger, and that's something we need to be mindful of going into the ballot box in November.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is why we have a separation of powers, and we have a judicial branch that is supposed to be inherently non-political. And we need to, as conservatives, advocate for that always. But Legal Eagles, you're going to stick around for another topic coming up right after this on Jenna Ellis Tonight. We'll be right back. Well, friends, you might have heard that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, so they want to pass along the savings directly to you by having a $25 extravaganza. I love that word, extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. To get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use My Pillows are just $25. My Pillow sandals, also awesome, only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are $25. And brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. For the first time ever, the premium My Pillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, or call 800-564-8475 today. That's 800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna. We're back with our legal eagles, Mike Donnelly and Gerard Filitti, and we are talking about the state of America's institutions and the judicial branch in particular. And it seems like there are so many political attacks from the left that are trying on purpose to tear down the Supreme Court and the entire institution of justice and our judicial branch. And this tweet coming from Carrie Severino, who calls attention to the fact Democrats are threatening to defund the Supreme Court as a way to force Chief Justice Roberts to adopt quote unquote ethics reforms in the wake of more manufactured controversies ginned up by the left. She also posted this headline from The Hill: Democrats see Supreme Court leverage in spending bills. So Gerard, this coming also in the wake of this activist reporter that snuck into what should have been a closed event for the Supreme Court Historical Society and caught Justice Alito on tape simply, being very polite and just agreeing that, one side or the other is going to win. And really stuff that is not controversial, but these are manufactured controversies from the left. And now the Democrats are actually threatening to defund the Supreme Court. What would that even look like?
Well, first, it's absolutely manufactured. If you listen to the tape, if you look at the transcript, there is nothing there that accords with the headline that the left has been using, which is that Justice Alito admits to the lack of impartiality. That's a manufactured headline. That's not what he said. That's not the content of what he said or where he was going with that. So that's a fictitious headline to sell a story. And the story that's being sold is that the Democratic Congress wants to intrude on the power of the judiciary, that separation of powers, which has been sacrosanct in American law for 2 centuries now. Congress wants to step in and basically manhandle the judiciary into getting results that they want, with the threat of spending bills or ethics reforms that will be imposed on them if they don't act. So that's what this is. This is a manufactured controversy in order for Democrats to try to exert power over the Supreme Court because they don't like the way it's ruling.
Yeah, and Mike, I can remember the days of the leftists saying that the Supreme Court's opinions are sacrosanct. We can't even second guess them. There's precedent, there's super precedent that they thought Roe versus Wade was, and any sort of criticism of the outcome that they preferred from an opinion on the U.S. Supreme Court, you can't criticize it. But as soon as now we have a more conservative majority, suddenly the Democrats are gunning for Justice Alito. They are asking Chief Justice Roberts to come in and meet with only partisan Democrats, which he declined to do in a very well-worded letter. They're threatening to now defund the Supreme Court, to pack the court. I mean, this is all just manipulative, and it is weaponizing Congress. So, where should this go?
Well, Jenna, you may be surprised by what I'm about to say, but I'm sympathetic to the Democrats' accusations against the court. It's not so much the court, it's the way our system of justice has been co-opted for political purposes. Read Mark Levin's books about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of the United States has become an adjunct policy-making entity. It was never intended to be that. 9 people should not be making the momentous consequential decisions that they are making. It has happened because the federal government overall has become too powerful, too big, too influential. And so if we talk about reforming our Article 3 branch, yeah, we need to reform it, but it needs to be done through constitutional means. And, look, it's not about who wins or who loses. It's a process here. We want to win, sure. But at the end of the day, do we care about our country? Do we care about a justice system that is working the way it was intended to? Article 3 in the Constitution is the smallest article compared to Congress, which is the largest. Congress is number one. The Supreme Court should not be number one, but people see it that way, which is why they focus so much attention on it, which is why there's so much money spent and time spent on who's going to be the justice. It should not be that way. It was never intended to be that way. And I would encourage my fellow Americans who are watching right now, go read Brutus 15, the Anti-Federalist Papers. He called it 30 years ago. He said this would happen. It's happened.
Yeah, well said. And we should return to civics and to understanding the purpose of government. And instead of just attempting to weaponize any of the political branches and targeting even the judicial branch for political gain and outcome, we should be focused on returning to our founding and the original intent of the Constitution, which doesn't, Gerard, include an oligarchy of 9 robed justices. So this raises a bigger question of judicial reform. What should conservatives be advocating for in that space?
Well, before we get to judicial reform, we need to be looking at congressional action, because I think ultimately one of the problems is Congress is not doing its job. It passes laws that are purposely vague, that give power to the executive, that ends up being filled in by political appointees through rulemaking processes, and then that results in challenges that end up before the Supreme Court. Even Roe v. Wade, the Congress didn't want to address abortion; it left it to the courts. John Roberts, he has been very good, I think, since the Obamacare decision came down in establishing that it should not be for the Supreme Court to be making law or policy. That's for Congress to do. So first and foremost, we need to get back to reforming what Congress is doing and hold them accountable for passing legislation that is clear, makes sense, and doesn't need constant resolution in the courts. But how do we reform the judiciary? I think the first step is recognizing that very issue, that there is a delineation of power and that the court's not there to make rules. It's there to clarify what intent, to clarify what the law is, to apply it to select circumstances that are brought before it, but not to make policy, which is unfortunately what's ended up happening for many decades now, because Congress has left that in the hands of the court. It doesn't want to do its job, and it's easier to punt than to actually work.
Yeah, so well said. And I couldn't agree more. And there are unfortunately too many on the Republican side that would just like to get media headlines and, some of these quick things without actually doing the work of Congress. But you also raised an important point that goes to the issue of Chevron deference, which, Mike, you and I spoke about on this program last week, and the pending judicial opinion, where should that case go in terms of taking away some of these vaguely worded legislation that comes out of Congress that are filled in by the bureaucrats, and the Supreme Court does have an opportunity here to tell Congress to do its job.
It does, and I think it will. These cases will abrogate Chevron deference, which basically means that the courts defer to the agency. And as Gerard just said, Congress is vague, and so the agency fills in the gaps. So Congress is going to have to do its job. And I'm glad that this case has finally made its way through the courts and that the court has it. I'm eager to see what the court does. I really hope, and I think they will, say this is not how Article 1 is intended to work. Article 1 cannot just hand off to Article 2, the executive branch, the job. You've got to do it.
Yeah, and I'll stay with you really quickly for one moment, Mike. This gets into a broader conversation about the Convention of States project and utilizing Article 5 to have some returns to federalism, to state authority. What quickly is your position on that? I'm an open advocate, and I've endorsed Convention of States for years.
Yeah, well, Jenna, I am too. I've been a firm supporter of calling a constitutional convention, and I understand people have strong opinions on both sides. But we are at a place in our country where I don't think we have any other option. The people need to take control of our country and reform it, and Congress is not going to do it. They can't. Article 5 was given to us by the founders. It's the last tool left in our toolbox. It's time to use it.
Yeah, so well said. Well, Legal Eagles, you'll be staying with me for one more topic. Speaking of federal overreach, we're going to talk about a federal opinion that has now undercut Governor Ron DeSantis in the Florida legislature when we come right back here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Hi, friends. Jenna Ellis, host of Jenna Ellis Tonight, and we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an utter disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a constant issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, and those have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. So there are so many reasons that Americans should consider wise investing, and investments in gold and silver, and legacy precious metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com, download the free investor guide, and I have read it. There is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is the time to not roll the dice on your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that is in gold and that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals and make sure to tell them that I sent you. While Democrats are touting the recently released jobs report, others are suggesting that the Biden economy is not providing any new jobs for native-born Americans. So what really is the state of the economy? Let's welcome in Tho Bishop from the Mises Institute. And Tho, I think every American, if we are honest, thinks that the state of the economy is abysmal. But what is the truth about the state of jobs in the United States? Does Biden actually have anything to be proud of?
Well, the jobs numbers have been kind of the focal point of what the Biden administration, the campaign, Democrats generally have been pointing to as a sign of the vibrance of the economy. And of course, there's a number of factors that go into once you actually start breaking down the numbers, which themselves are in aggregates and don't always tell the full picture, right? But if you look at the amount of the hiring that has come in the government sector, that is a major source of new new jobs created. If you look at the number of part-time jobs, and of course, there's now studies out there highlighting the extent to which domestic American workers have not seen the same gains that a lot of those job increases, a lot of those employment increases have come from immigrants. Now, there's a variety of factors that go into that, right? Some of that is just demographics. You have boomer generations increasingly retiring. So that's going to lead to a factor. You have a lot of younger people in particular that are putting off going into employment. They're spending more time in college. That's contributing to the student loan crisis and the like. So, it's once you start breaking down these numbers, what is the constant is that the extent to which, again, all of the DC chatter about the strength of the vibrance of the economy, this is why there's this massive disconnect between Main Street and what we're trying to be told from Washington, and that's not even factoring in the cost of living, wages not keeping up with inflation and things like that. So that's what's building this much broader resentment to this economic mismanagement here, because again, the gains that are being touted are not really being felt on mainstream, particularly amongst American born and bred workers.
Yeah, and there is a real disconnect between the messaging and what the average American feels. How much is this likely to influence the 2024 election when we are focusing on, as I said in the last segment, court TV pretty much, and that seems to be the trials of Hunter Biden and Donald Trump seem to be the focal points of the November election. But really, what exit polling is showing is that Americans care more about border security and the economy than even any of the weaponization of government on either side that's being messaged.
Ultimately, surprise, surprise, most Americans, particularly those that are kind of the alleged swing voters, right? They care more about what's happening at their kitchen table than all of the cable news, hysterics and things like that. And the stress is really being felt, and that's why, in particular, it's the non-regular voters, the people that are generally apathetic. Don't have any particular cheerleading colors that they have. Those are the ones that the reason why Trump is ahead in national polling is because of those religious style voters, those people that may or may not show up in an election. And this is because of, again, just this people recognize that their day-to-day life now is a lot different than it was 5-6 years ago. So I think this is why you have so much. You're starting to see the Biden campaign, I think, recognize that there is a much bigger problem here. Their internals are probably worse than what the publicly available polling based off their own decisions. And so yeah, I think this is going to be the factor going into this election time.
Yeah, isn't it? It always seems like the internals on both sides are worse than the polls that they all tout. But is this messaging coming from trying to put this around the jobs report actually resonating, do you think, with any of these voters that may not have made up their mind? And we only have about 30 seconds left.
Yeah, well, I don't think the reporting itself matters a lot as much as the experience here. And there is, I think, this massive generational divide in politics. I think you kind of saw it played out in Europe in its own way with the massive swing amongst Kyoto voters to right-wing support. Is that when the current status quo isn't working, you're going to embrace something that's a change. Trump represents that change this time around. Your right-wing parties represent that in Europe, and I think that is something that, again, this economic anxiety, particularly amongst younger people, can really change some voting behaviors.
Yeah, really well said. I mean, and sometimes it takes being so uncomfortable with the status quo that you're willing to vote for the upset. And that was certainly what Trump represented in 2016. But we'll have to see. So we'll be right back with more from our Legal Eagle panel and another interesting topic right after this. And we're back with our Legal Eagles for one other topic that we definitely needed more time for. So Mike Donnelly and Gerard Filitti, thanks so much for rejoining. And this was a clear federal overreach yesterday out of the state of Florida. So this headline coming from Politico. And this is a federal judge strikes a Florida ban on gender-affirming care for children. The judge also blocked requirements that would make accessing care harder for transgender adults. So a federal judge has ruled that Florida's new restrictions on, quote unquote, gender-affirming treatment for children are unconstitutional, and that Governor Ron DeSantis and other Republican lawmakers who supported them were not acting in the interest of public health. By refusing to allow children to access treatments, Tallahassee-based District Court Judge Robert Hinkle wrote in a ruling handed down Tuesday that DeSantis and Republicans who voted for the measure responded in a way that was similar to racism and misogyny. I mean, listen to this. Quote, enforcing this moral view is not, however, a legitimate state interest that can sustain this statute. Hinkle, an appointee of President Bill Clinton, wrote, partly borrowing from arguments that lawyers for the plaintiffs gave during trial in December. So Jeremy Redfern, who is Governor DeSantis's press secretary and spokesperson, responded with this. Quote, through their elected representatives, the people of Florida acted to protect children in this state, and the court was wrong to override their wishes. We disagree with the court's erroneous rulings on the law, on the facts, and on the science. As we've seen here in Florida, the United Kingdom, and across Europe, there is no quality evidence to support the chemical and physical mutilation of children. These procedures do permanent, life-altering damage to children, and history will look back on this in horror. Under Governor Ron DeSantis, Florida will continue to fight to ensure children are not chemically or physically mutilated in the name of radical, new age gender ideology. We will appeal this ruling. So, Mike Donnelly, I will just kick it to you for your reaction.
Well, Jenna, this is very troubling. And I really try to be very compassionate for the people who are grappling with these issues over gender confusion. It's a serious problem we have in our country. And so I'm sensitive to that. But for a court to say that the state has no legitimate interest in protecting children, ensuring fairness in competitive sports, in protecting the privacy of women in bathrooms or in locker rooms, in legislating for social stability and order, for protecting the marriage and family and recognizing those as fundamental building blocks of society, for regulating healthcare, for regulating medical treatment as they do in a variety of different programs, and for the public health and safety. All of those issues are legitimate state interests. All of those issues touch on this question of the state's ability to regulate medical treatments for minors and even for adults. What's happening, with children let's be clear. These people want to use the term gender-affirming care. That is linguistic infiltration. It is an attempt to co-opt language in an attempt to change the way people think to advance their political ideology of transgenderism. It's not affirming. It's not care. It is destructive. It is neglectful or abusive or malpractice. That's what it is. And the judge wrote in his opinion, he said, it's not in the legitimate state interest to impede a person from conforming to their gender identity rather than a person's quote unquote natal sex. He said that's not a legitimate state interest. It's very troubling. I'm interested to hear what Gerard has to say about this as well.
Yeah, I am too. And Gerard, I mean, for the judge to say that this type of ideology is not a legitimate state interest, he's affirming the ideology of leftists. I mean, you can't escape that there is ideology on both sides. And in fact, all of law, what we permit in society, what we prohibit, is based on someone's worldview. And so how do we define state interest adequately when you have an opinion that is just so beyond absurd, like what this federal judge put out?
Now, the absurdity here, Jenna, or rather the irony, is that it's usually the leftists who are all about it's the science, not the morality. But here it's science denial. They're looking at studies that came out in the UK and Europe, even in the United States, that sees that there is risk of harm, a significant risk of harm to children who undergo these so-called treatments. And that's the fundamental reason, the scientific reason of why this legislation was passed. You can view it as moralizing, but what this is an attempt to protect the children of the state of Florida from medical procedures that should not be done because they are risky and the consequences are not known. That's the science. And here we have the liberals who are arguing that, no, it's not science, it's morality. We should allow people to define what they are and do whatever they want to their bodies, even if it's dangerous and even if it's irreversible. So this is the irony here, that we have science denial by the people who use that argument the most. And on a constitutional basis, the state has every right and authority to be involved in this kind of legislation. This is precisely what it is supposed to legislate. It has the expertise. It has the knowledge. It looks at the science to see what is safe and what's not in the practice of medicine, even down to having doctors prescribe treatment and not registered nurses or other medical practitioners. So this is the same as any other legislation that a state normally passes, but here it's suspect to the left because it deals with how they perceive the morality of people identifying themselves.
Yeah, such a brilliantly laid out argument. This is why I love asking questions to a brilliant legal minds like both of you. And so, Mike, what should Governor DeSantis's appeal contain? I mean, these arguments are so important, not just to this case, but I think to the future of actual legitimate state interests, where the federal government shouldn't even be intervening here.
That's right, Jenna. I think this case will go to the 11th Circuit. I don't know what the 11th Circuit will do, but eventually it will probably end up with the Supreme Court of the United States, as it should. 24 states have passed laws regulating this kind of experimentation. I don't know what to call it. It's not medical care. It's people who are experimenting, who are confused, and they need to be treated with compassion and care, real care, not drugs that mess them up and make them suicidal, especially for children. But this is not a hard case. Of course, the state has a legitimate interest here. What's crazy is these judges, and you've seen it in the Fourth Circuit as well in the West Virginia case, where these judges are contorting themselves into philosophical pretzels, trying to use language and sentences that you can't even understand without spending an hour deconstructing the sentences themselves. It doesn't make sense. It's not rational. And so what Florida is doing is rational. So I think eventually this will end up in the right place.
Yeah, and Gerard, it reminds me when we speak of sentences and opinions that don't even make sense. The Hawaii Supreme Court that recently invoked the spirit of aloha to rule on some kind of constitutional basis. I mean, this is how absurd leftist judges are becoming. And so heading into 2024, how big of an issue should the Trump campaign and Republicans make of the federal judiciary? Because this was a Bill Clinton appointee, and we've seen a lot of other federal judges that have come out of Democrat nominations, including recently the Biden appointee that reaffirmed, I'm not a biologist, I can't comment on what a woman is. I mean, that is science denial as well. And so, this issue hasn't been at the fore when we've talked about court TV and some other things. How big of an issue should this be in terms of voting for the president in 2024?
I think it's a huge issue. For those of us who are lawyers, it's always been a huge issue, but now the American public has the unique opportunity to see it because we've been seeing it nonstop with the multiple complaints, the multiple criminal charges against Donald Trump. So what better chance, what better time to make the point that who you elect as president, who you elect to the highest office of the land, who appoints judges, is very consequential. And the types of judges, the types of rulings that you will see are very much dependent on that. And this highlights it like nothing else. It's not just these rulings in Florida. We had a similar ruling in Arkansas. We have a similar challenge in Tennessee. Judges who come out with the most bizarre and contrarian decisions where there's tortured logic to reach a conclusion that they morally agree with and that's not legally defensible. This is why we need to be careful who we vote for, because these people who we vote for are the ones who get the judges in position where they make these rulings. So this is a critical issue. It's not just the border. It's not just the economy, but we're seeing now the lawfare that's being waged in America by one party against another, by one group of people against another. And the only way to stop this from getting worse is to have the right people on the bench.
Yeah. All right. Last 20 seconds. Mike, your closing thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I'll just come back to the federalism issue. It's unfortunate that the federal judges are in this position because the Supreme Court has put them there and Congress has allowed the Supreme Court to get away with it. Article 5.
Yeah, well said. Well, absolutely. And Legal Eagle, so appreciate your insight and analysis. We will be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. And finally tonight, Europe is taking a hard right turn, which is very fascinating in terms of global politics. First, this headline coming from CNBC. France's Macron calls for snap election after losing big to the far right in EU vote. French President Emmanuel Macron said he would dissolve parliament and call for a new election after suffering a heavy defeat in EU elections on Sunday. Marine Le Pen's far-right National Party is set to win around 31.5% of the vote compared to 15.2% for Macron's Renaissance Party, according to exit polls. Macron said in a TV address, quote, "I will not be able at the end of this day to act as if nothing had happened," according to a translation by CNBC. Then in Germany, and this headline coming from the BBC, the far right celebrates beating Scholz's party. "We demand a vote of confidence and new elections," said the leader of Germany's far right alternative for Germany, the AfD, who told journalists that on Monday, people have had enough. And then interestingly, this poll coming from Foreign Policy, Europe's youth are fueling the far right. Quote, "Evidence is mounting that Europe's far right will score better than ever in the upcoming European Parliament elections on June 6th to June 9th, and that continent's young voters will fuel its ascent. The young adults are now gravitating to the far right, aren't Nazis or xenophobic racists, but they may have a hand in the outcome that will, at the very least, shift the European Union's priorities and accents to the far right. A particularly solid right-wing finish and cooperation across the hard right spectrum could rattle EU unity and throw a wrench into the bloc's workings at a time when it is confronting acute crises on several fronts, not the least of which is the war in Ukraine." So a little bit of bias there, but let's welcome in Matt Tyrmand, who is a Claremont Institute Lincoln Fellow, and he is in Scotland today, so he joins us by phone. Matt, take it away. Your thoughts on the right and even the far right actually succeeding in Europe. Maybe the Marxists have overplayed their hands.
Oh, no, it's absolutely the trend has been strong now the last two cycles. The right really entered European Parliament in a material way in 2014, gained very, very largely in 2019, and now in 2024, 5 years later, they are poised to have major impact on European Union procedures, whether it's borders, economics, migration as it relates to jobs, crime, deportation is now on the table, whereas previously many of these countries, even if their national electorates would have voted for it, the EU would have come down hard on them like they have on Poland and Hungary in recent years with their moves to the right. And now with the right across major conferences, ECR, European Conservative and Reformists, the ID group, which Le Pen's party dominates, they're going to have a big role to play in shaping parliamentary process and politics going forward for the entire continent. This was a big, especially on the French side, German as well, but on the French side, I mean, the French right have been gaining for years, and now it's, proof's in the pudding with the snap elections. Macron knows that he has to go out and campaign to retain any form of mandate from the people. The French are absolutely fed up with the state of Europe and them being ground zero with this major industrial economy and country that's been essentially overrun, and the crime is rampant. The economy is hindered as a result. So this is a big accelerating of the previous inflection point, and now it's going to matter. And it's not just France and Germany. It's Holland with Geert Wilders. That's reinforced. It's Belgium. The two right-wing parties, Vlaams Belang and the Flemish Conservatives, they are now going to be in play in the heart, the seat of European politics in Brussels. They are going to, follow the same path as the French. So this is a big, big deal, and we're seeing it now in England as well, which is not part of the European Union. And Nigel Farage and Reform, the successor to UKIP and then Brexit Party, are also gaining, and they're neck and neck with the Conservatives. And by this time next month, they could be the opposition to Labour and could be in position to really take control in the next couple of years. So we're seeing far right accelerate all over the European continent and the West, which is, for me, is very heartening because I've been working on the ground for the better part of the decade. We saw it in Sweden as well with the Swedish Democrats a few years ago, winning national elections and being part of the making this new conservative government in Sweden. So, and it's all around the same issues that we just discussed, which is immigration.
Yeah, and shouldn't that also influence the right here in the United States? I mean, if Europe is making these advances, shouldn't the United States? And yet we see that a lot of the polling is tied between Biden and Trump.
Yeah, in theory, I mean, 16, the 14, 15, 16, 14 with the European Parliament elections, 15 with the the Parliament elections of 14, and then 15 in a lot of national elections across Europe, like in Poland. But then in 16, we saw Brexit and Trump, and there was a correlation there, and it was also, again, about immigration. But, as Europe has continued to move to the right, we saw what happened in 2020. We may have a failed messenger who talked about immigration but did not do enough. Certainly, immigration is the forefront of this cycle, but we will see,
and it
with
should be the biggest issue, and we're going
to
to have to leave it there. Matt Tyrmand joining us from Scotland on the phone. That is all the time we have here on Jenna Ellis Tonight, and make it a great night.